I guess it could be a noun, like...
A fart.
I kind of agree with Chad, I guess, but I think this argument is dumb and stupid.
Welcome to No Clip. I'm Chad Rellingman.
I'm JJ Artemis.
And I'm Andy Koenig.
And today, on this dark and stormy October night, we're going to be talking about Fatal Frame, Maiden of Black Water. And I really hope that, like, some of the rain that's happening does get picked up, because it would go from, like, could be very creepy and then maybe, like, relaxing, possibly. Any of those emotions I would be cool with. But the game is a survival horror game that was developed by Koei Tecmo and published by Nintendo in 2014 in Japan and 2015 in, like, North America and Europe. And that's actually the first kind of interesting thing that I feel like we should actually start with, is the fact that this game is pretty much, like, even people who were fans of Fatal Frame probably haven't played this game because of how difficult it was to play. Like, it's a downloadable title with a huge file on the Wii U with no disk space only. And it had a limited edition physical release in the US.
And not only in Europe.
Oh.
It has a disc release in Japan. It had a limited release in Europe and got no physical release in the States.
Nor had I even heard about it through any channels other than you just being like, hey, you know there's a Fatal Frame game?
Yeah, and I only knew about it because the year it came out, I guess 2015, on the Wii U eShop, it was, like, featured, like, on the front page. It was like, try the Fatal Frame demo. And I was like, Fatal Frame game on the Wii U.
Hell yeah.
That seems pretty sweet.
Yeah.
So I played the demo and enjoyed it.
The demo was really good.
Yeah.
Like, as far as a demo goes, I think they did a really good job of actually sort of, like, giving you an idea of what the game was. And the fact that it had a demo was a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found it really memorable. Like, I played it and then immediately wanted to buy it, but then didn't for like 2 years because, you know, no space.
Yeah.
On the Wii U.
So I'm getting the sense that this game was kind of like a background ghostly harbinger, like a specter over your lives, and something that, like, mysteriously came from nowhere.
Well, it was, I don't know, it was something, I think we've actually even mentioned it on the podcast before. We talked about it on, in Go Clip, in the car episode, where we were saying, like, why we would return to the Wii U, like, if there was anything that we would go back for, and this is one of the things that we listed that we wanted to go back and actually play, and thankfully to the bounty of games that is this podcast, we were able to finally go and play it. Mm-hmm. Which brings me to, how did you take to it, I guess? Like, starting out.
Me personally, I'm the one who bought the game.
Right,
and,
yeah.
Full
disclosure, only one copy of this game was sold.
I upgraded my storage on my Wii U when I wanted to play Xenoblade X, so I had space for this game. So I bought it and shared it with everyone. Shared it with the class. But so when I booted it up, it gave me the option to just, like, start where the demo ends, and I was like, yeah, that'll save some time.
About, like, 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, I was like, I want to like make sure I finish this on time, you know. So I kind of, like, re-taught myself the controls, like, on my own, which was probably not a good idea.
If you recall me skipping the first 4 minutes of Severed, meaning that I didn't know what triggered the Severed thing happening all the way through the game. When you start a game, you should start it from the beginning. This is a no-clip life lesson.
But, so I was fairly experimental in the first few chapters I played, but it worked out.
To be fair, the mechanics of this game are pretty obscured, even when they try and explain it to you. It takes a little bit of time to understand a lot of the text and points that are popping up on screen, how to shift between the lenses, and what all the lenses do. partially because a lot of the symbols on those things aren't in English.
Right.
Well, that may be true, but like, I think most of the things that they attempt to actually tutorialize, which they give you a clear indication of by putting the word tutorial on screen every time that anything is being tutorialized, even like I think they do a fine job of conveying those mechanics, like the necessary ones.
Mm-hmm.
However, I also think that the game's combat starts to stop working as well once you like have a full understanding of it, which I think is part of the reason why they put the score, like the arcade mode score, in the game. But also, your first run through of the game, I think, the worse you are at it, the better the game is, which is kind of a weird thing to have happen, especially in a game with a score in it. But that's just sort of how it worked out. By the end of it, I felt like I was not being challenged by the game. I was just sort of like pressing buttons in a set order every time, and there are only a few things that really gave me any issue.
Could you go into more detail on why you think the score and the measures of your score are so omnipresent through the game? Because that's like my one huge lingering question about the visual design of this game, which I think is fine to good otherwise.
See, I think this is another thing that we'll probably get into as like a whole thing, but I think that the visuals in this game are actually super good until they aren't. And that has a lot to do with the Wii U and has a lot to do with how much seems to have slipped under the radar when they were like putting this game out. But the score thing just seems like off to me. Like, it's a very Capcom type thing to do.
Yes.
Where it's like, even like with a grade score and everything. And I feel like this game, and all games ever, would be better if they took a little bit of a page out of Resident Evil 4's book, which does have the same level splits. Like, it actually, you play a discrete level and then get a card at the end. Mm-hmm. But the card just tells you the time that you spent playing, the number of times you died, and the number of times that you saved. In Fatal Frame, it's like a full score breakdown. Like, this is how many of these that you got, how many items you had, and then, like, documents collected. There's, like, a whole shit thing, and then it gives you a grade, which makes you like, oh, I want to go back and play that level again and get better at it, but you don't. Like, you don't want to do that in a horror game. Like, I've never finished a level in a horror game and been like, I want to go slog through that ghost-infested area one more time.
Yeah, it's a horror game.
Roll it back!
Yeah, you bring up Resident Evil 4.
As I always do.
As you always do, but...
it's appropriate this time.
It reminds me of what I said on the Bayonetta cast, where I feel like this game belongs in with those, where I feel like the visuals are very heavily inspired by Resident Evil. Mm-hmm. Like, it feels like the characters are modeled in a similar kind of style, and it's textured in a similar kind of way. And it almost seems like it's just kind of... that is very intentional. And I feel like it might even lift the score, and, like, they want you to play the game over and over again, like it's Bayonetta.
Right. It's the score element in a game is there if the game's mechanics like call for you to make some kind of self-improvement, and Fatal Frames kind of just don't. Mm-mm. And this is all of our first Fatal Frame game, I believe.
Yes.
Is the fifth one, and I'm sure a lot of people are kind of, crying afoul that this is the first one that we chose to do, as it's gotten kind of a bad rap. I don't know about these guys, but I actually found myself really enjoying this game, and will probably try and seek out the other ones, even though they're PlayStation 2 games, kind of hard to find. But the mechanics, at least in this variation of the game, are to the point where once you have a handle on it, I was getting an S rank on pretty much every chapter, a smattering of S pluses, and then 2 or 3 A's over the course of the whole game.
Yeah, it's over the first 3 maybe episodes, your score will improve, and then you'll just get A's to S's.
Or above all the way
all
across.
the rest of the way.
So the score thing just seems kind of unnecessary on that.
Even if this game did have a mechanic set that had the kind of like depth and fidelity where you were constantly improving over the entire experience, it would still be weird and jarring to me that a game that's very clearly trying to be a horror experience, like literally every other part of the game that is that score is trying to scare you or creep you out in some way, successful or otherwise. Like, I'm not playing this game. The appeal of this game is not self-improvement. I don't want to end a level of Fatal Frame and go like, yeah, I did awesome that time. Like, high five, I got it so much better. That's like, what horror experience wants to end like that? Maybe Resident Evil 4 wants to end like that.
Yeah, because they'll put you up against like a boss fight or something, and that's where that comes from.
It's an action horror game. It's trying to like be a part of that sort of pulpy genre at the same time, and it's successful at that. But Jesus, this is like Japanese style horror. This is supposed to be like, you know, really cognitive and messing with your head all the time. I don't want to be excited or happy about anything when I'm walking through like dingy rain tunnels.
I don't know about the other games in the series, but like, or it could be that like the mechanical aspects of it are like a big draw to some people, or it could be like a cultural thing.
Yeah, both things are totally possible. I've read my fair share at this point of people wondering like, what are the optimal routes to get S+s in different levels, and I will acknowledge that there's a level of satisfaction where you like line up two enemies and like blast and get like just see a million text prompts like spill down the screen, overkill,
it
all that
seems
shit.
like it would be a good inclusion that like you unlock after you beat it.
Like
it
a
seems
score
like,
attack.
Yeah,
mode.
like the something that like if you want to play it again, it increases the replayability because now you can play the levels over and over and like get a high score and whatever.
Right. I mean, it does, when you finish the game, you do unlock Nightmare Mode, which that seems like, to that point, this game has a hard difficulty, Nightmare Mode, 9 different endings, or I guess like 2 endings per character, meaning that it necessitates at least 2 playthroughs to get all of the endings. And a, like, C through S+ grading curve. Like, if they needed more reasons to make this game replayable, like, I can't even imagine. There's just so much, like, already there just saying, like, hey, why don't you replay this level? It's something I've never done.
You know what's not there to signal that? Any kind of like moment-to-moment variability in what you actually do and the kind of challenges that occur to you in the game. Like, every single one of these ghosts seems to pop up in roughly the same fashion, present a like medium to non-existent threat to you, and you fight it off in the same way, even if you're terrible mechanically at the game. Because you know, like you said, as you go on, you begin to understand how to do things that are progressively more optimal, like conserving film, getting more literal fail frames, things like that.
Right.
But at no point, even if you're complete garbage at it, the amount of like health potion pause menu safety net that you have at any given time just completely negates any tension as soon as you realize that you can do that and that you can pause whenever you want. Sidebar, this may go down in history as one of my least favorite trends in any game that's trying to create tension, and it's a thing that I'm glad seems to be slowly dying.
You mean being able to pause the game to heal?
Being able to pausing the game at any time to heal.
Yeah,
right.
That's well, you can't pause when you have the camera out.
Right.
You choose when the camera's out.
Yeah, but it's like you can't, like, if you have the camera up and you get attacked, you could die. You might not be able to put the camera down and pause in time.
Yeah.
But it's basically you can pause anytime you want and heal.
Right.
But yeah, I said that I brought this up on the Breath of the Wild podcast.
And
Like,
we've read it
pausing the
a number
game
of
to
times.
heal just needs to be a thing that goes away forever.
We talked about it on Skyrim as well. It's like anytime that you can just sort of like stop the game, eat 1,000. We talked about BioShock.
Yeah.
How he just has would just have a stash of chips, and that would ruin the game. That kind of a thing. It legitimately does just ruin the game when there's a situation where you find yourself in a dire circumstance, and then suddenly, oh no, I'm actually at full health and more. I'm even better than I was before. There are items in the game called mirror stones that I guess allow you to come back to life after you die. And I felt like I wasn't toting around any fewer than 3 of those at any given time.
Yeah.
It seems... I'm sure a lot of this is alleviated on Nightmare.
Right.
But I also don't think that the challenge is really the thing that makes this game good or makes this game effective. I think there was a decision that was made to make that the case. But at the same time, the game is easy.
In order to make resource management a compelling part of a horror game, your resources have to be super, super constrained. RE4 let up on this a little bit with the case system, but still had a system in place that constrained you. But the first Resident Evil did this the best in that you were just hyper constrained about the number of items that you could bring with you at any time.
Right. The fact that actually had an inventory limit. I mean, there are limits. You can't have 99.
Yeah, not having the infinite amount of the weakest film.
Right, yeah.
Could have been a thing where you have to manage how much film you have at all times. Could have been cool.
They really should have just made the weakest film weaker because...
Yeah, because I basically just used it the whole game.
Right.
Because on one of the early missions, I ran out of film on the boss, and because I skipped the tutorial, I didn't know how to switch film easily. So I was just like, well, I'm just going to just always use the infinite film and never have to worry about it.
And then I'll switch to the good film when it's time. But it never happens.
Yeah, when I got to the boss, but then I would always just not do that.
Yeah, did anybody here ever use double-aught film?
No.
Yeah, I had a maximum of 3 on me occasionally, and just never felt the need to pull it out.
Yeah,
because even just switching to 90, what is your basic best film, was still just good enough.
Yeah, I might have used it on the final boss, but I don't remember.
Think about that behavior mechanically in the context of a horror film. At that point, the mechanics have forced you into the kind of character who's looking through their sack full of supplies just nah, I don't need this. I'll just get this instead. It'll all be fine.
That's in the context of a horror film, or in the context of horror anything, there are tons of things that get cut from being considered. You've never seen anyone in a horror... I'm not going to say that because obviously there's going to be some example of somebody being oh, it's so late, I'm exhausted, I need to sleep. Maybe the slasher will stop chasing me for a little bit. They just cut out the parts that are boring and shitty, and in the case of this game, I feel like they didn't feel as though the resource management was the source of the tension. The source of the tension was mostly the atmosphere that you're immersed in, the story of the game, and the threat of enemies.
And bending over to pick things up.
And I think that while the threat of enemies thing is just a total failure, I'm not super upset about it because, as I've talked about pretty much any time that we've talked about a horror game, there's a kind of a difficult balance between how you want the game to be punishing to generate tension, but not so hard that people won't push through, because you have negative emotions building on top of negative emotions in a horror game, and so you want to balance the ones that are fun and the ones that are irritating to make sure that what you're left with is net positive.
Yeah.
And this game really toned down on the difficulty to make it basically a breeze to walk through. And yet, more so than any other horror game that we've played for the podcast, at least, I have not been more afraid during sequences in most other horror games than I was in this one, even though I knew there was basically no threat of death.
Really? I assume that was all pre-combat and environmental circumstances for you?
Only in combat.
Really?
Because the genius of this game is the gamepad gimmick. of the camera thing, where at its best is like a totally diegetic camera that you hold and spin around the room and go like, ooh, there's a ghost on my left. And so anytime that I was able to look at a guy, bring the gamepad in front of me like I would if it was an actual camera, which I consciously tried to do as much as I could, go into camera mode, and then start swinging the camera like in a 270 degree maximum. I'm gonna say I don't think I ever like got up and turned around.
But what if the ghost was behind you, Chad?
I used the joystick. I was not lazy enough to like get up and look at the ghost. Not to mention the gamepad's battery life is like 50 minutes, so it had to be plugged in a lot of the time. But like then actually, because the fact that it's like right in front of you and you're like actively doing stuff to try and take care of it. That's like a heart-pounding, cool thing. And I would play a million games like this just for that experience.
So, would you say that you really liked the motion control in this game, Chan?
100% best motion controls since Splatoon.
Yeah. That, like, just baffles me. Because I feel like this game, like, exacerbates all the things you hate about motion controls.
That's just not true, but I'll accept it.
They want you to play the game by like holding the controller up in front of your face,
right?
And I remember when we were playing Trauma Center that you didn't want to like lift the Wii remote up to point at the television.
Well, that's a
like
different...
you seem like you hate like lifting the thing to activate the motion controls, so you think it's stupid and you hate motion controls on that fundamental of a level.
The fundamental level that I don't like motion controls on is very heavily basically like Wii motion controls. The thing that I don't like about motion controls, particularly in the Wii U, and I always go to the Mario Galaxy example because it's one I have the most like experience with, is I don't like doing a thing with motion controls to represent something on screen that is like not, this doesn't in any way reflect it. So when you waggle the Wii remote to make Mario do a spin jump, it's just like another button. Like there could have been a button that just made him do that, and it's an unnecessary like thing.
Right.
The reason this game works is because the motion controls are like, this is as close to one-to-one as it gets because it's not trying to emulate it on the screen. It's just showing you, when you turn, the literal thing you're looking at also turns.
Right.
So there isn't any sort of disconnect.
Yeah, but my other problem with it, that was more of a jokey
I got
point.
Motion controls still suck.
But as soon as you turn like more than like 45 degrees, it immediately becomes unsynced with the television.
Okay, I don't look at the TV.
See, like, I looked back and forth between the TV and the gamepad because there's valuable information on both, and I think they intend you to play it that way.
I would agree, but I didn't.
And I think it just doesn't work very well. Like, it's almost there, but it wants you to turn, like, all the way to your left to get the ghost over there. But then when you bring it back to the center, like and you're now like over like looking in the wrong place because it got desynced. Because when you turn it away from the TV, it like loses the calibration. So it just doesn't work on that level, and I just ended up immediately just putting it in my lap and like controlling it very slight, like it was Splatoon, and it worked like a million times better that way.
I mean, I almost wouldn't have played the main game on the TV. And really the thing that made me do it is because I liked having the map on the bottom screen, but then I'm just looking at the bottom screen anyway. So like I played, this game was probably like 75% me looking at the gamepad, 25% me looking at the screen. If this was a DS game, I wouldn't have noticed. Like, you could have just handed me a DS and I would have been like, oops, I've been playing a DS the whole time.
I was basically the exact opposite while playing, whereas I was only looking at the gamepad to take pictures.
Right.
And looking at the TV the whole rest of the time.
So where did you fall on that, JJ?
I am far closer to Chad's, and
I like it in concept. Like, I wish I was able to enjoy it in the way Chad did, but like, it just did not work for me.
In terms of actual like fidelity of controls, the thing where the game fell short for me was less in the one-to-one motion of treating the gamepad like a camera, which I agree with Chad is like a fantastic implementation of motion controls. Like, it is the promise of playing that part of this game is the reason we're doing this game at all, because it's such a cool promise to try and deliver on. And I was so focused on the gamepad once actual combat was initiated, even though I also kind of lazy, like, held it down on my lap, I still felt like I was into it doing the little steering wheel turns. The combat wasn't tense for reasons I already described, but it was something where I felt like the control was implemented well, and I wasn't thinking about, like, motion controls. I wasn't thinking about waggling in a certain way. I wasn't fighting anything, and I appreciated that. But where I ended up having control issues with this game was actually with controlling your avatar in the overworld.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No one will disagree with
Yeah,
that.
before we move on to that, because that's a whole issue in and of itself, I think what it was for what could have fixed it for me is if, like, the useful information that was only on the TV for seemingly no reason
was just
on the gamepad. Like, if when you had the camera up and you're looking at the gamepad, it's like zoomed in.
Yeah.
Like in comparison to what the TV shows. So if they had not done that, and it was like the same perspective as what's on the TV, and the dodge prompt appeared on the gamepad,
right,
I think it would have worked for me. But like I kept on like needing to like look up at the TV to like that just. I couldn't like do the separation where you guys were just like.
Only gamepad.
All my chips are on the gamepad. Like I couldn't do that.
Well, they ideally wanted it to work the way that you had, but I think that
it doesn't work.
The better compromise, I think, would have been to definitely put the dodge prompt on the gamepad.
Agreed.
But also just shave off the periphery on the TV as well. Like just make it so that you don't have a benefit.
Okay, to looking at the TV.
Yeah, because it does add to the like. Immersion or like the realism of it
to have the limited
like the viewfinder actual like scope of vision.
Yeah, it's one of the mechanical things that I thought worked with the horror tone is forcing your view to be limited, and they already can represent it as you're limiting your view by pressing the camera button instead of trying to like weirdly split the difference by having it so you have to limit your view. You both have to press the camera button and be looking at the camera.
Right.
Like you already have that choice, that sort of like little terrifying moment when it could be when you're holding down and looking at the camera, you can't know if anything's coming up on you, and that's scary too, and that could work.
Yep.
It sort of reminds me of a lot of the problems that Star Fox Zero did way shittier than this game.
Yeah, I had like
I guess I hadn't thought about that. Another game that wants you to look at the TV and at the gamepad.
Yeah.
This is actually something that I did think about Star Fox Zero, and it relates to the next thing, which was, despite how bad the controls are in terms of getting around in the world normally, which we'll expand upon, I was able to, like, manage it and, like, understand the walk around and take pictures 2 modes of this game so much faster than I was able to, like, because I never figured out how Star Fox Zero was supposed to work. Like, I just kept fucking up and dying in Star Fox Zero, and this game, like, it, like, literally some of the worst walking I've ever seen in a AAA game. Still way easier than Star Fox Zero to do anything.
Dude, this game, in terms of its overworld walking mechanics, is one of the few times... and correct me if you think this is an exaggeration. I remember having an easier time with Resident Evil 1's tank controls than with this game.
That's an over-exaggeration.
I disagree, but I think we had the same disagreement when talking about tank controls.
Yeah.
So.
I never played a game with tank controls as a kid, so like they're just awful to me. Like I cannot stand them. They're game ruining for me. Like, if a game has them, I won't play it.
Right, but over and above, like,
But anyway.
ignorance of the mechanics, the reason why I felt like it was so hard for me to try and do that navigation, it's one of those things where it just feels like a tuning issue, which makes it super hard to describe from an outside perspective, like, what's going wrong here. Like, it feels like, you know, there's always that button combination in Resident Evil games where you can, like, auto flip behind you and like, change your camera at a moment's notice. It feels like when I
kept trying to do it.
Yeah, and it kept doing it
like
a random direction. Like, I could never grasp how to change the direction I was facing, kind of at all.
I think what the problem is that the camera control is like always like loosely tied to your movement as well.
Yeah.
Like, if you were to just rotate the camera, it would make your character turn around too. So, like, there will be times where if you try to back up and move the camera at the same time, like, it just totally shits itself.
Yeah, there's no idea
just, like,
where
totally,
to
like,
do.
messes up what's happening.
Yeah, so the way that this game's movement mechanics work are that when you hold down on the analog stick in this game, your character's supposed to turn around, and sometimes just doesn't, because I think it requires, and this is me, I'm now spitballing because I didn't even think that this might have been a problem before, but like, I think maybe it's if you're not holding like perfectly down on the control stick, you'll just start to turn in the direction that you're holding. So, and yeah, like you said, your camera controls move your character's like upper torso, which you can see because like the flashlight moves.
Yeah.
So you end up in this fucking horrible, like, it's like if QWOP was somehow more of a functioning human being than it actually is.
It's like you have these instincts, or at least I would imagine most people do, from playing games all these years where, like, your right thumb's always on the analog stick if you're not pushing buttons.
Right.
So, like, you don't even, like, really realize that that's the problem, because, like, you're trying to move, and, like, you're trying to move the camera, too, and you're not even, like, thinking about how it's like.
Yeah, you want it to be independent, and the game forces you to not be independent. You're totally right, Chad. This game is like QWOP for your core. Like, it's just...
It has a problem with that, and the quick turn is supposed to be down and L. You press down and L, and the character and the camera reverse. And it works like, I would say it worked for me like 80% of the time, but that's still too low of a number for that crucial of a mechanic.
And it's also, like, the movement's too slow.
Movement's super slow. I'm also...
And, like, the animations aren't that great. They're a little stiff.
I don't think it's the Okay. There's some very stiff animations in this game.
Yes, there are.
But
like, the run animation's really awkward.
Yeah, it depends, and like it changes from character to character how awkward it is. But like, I think that there's a lot of good animation in this game.
Yeah,
here and there. But like, this is what I mean when I say that the game looks really good until it doesn't.
Yeah, there's a lack of polish.
Yeah, there's a weird situation, like, because like the environments look nice, and then like a shitty looking ghost hand comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, like, what's up with those?
Yeah, they're real bad.
It's like they're like the low res, like they forgot to finish modeling it version.
There's not even that much of a, like, no one was asking for like detailed ghosts,
because it's like the hand in the toilet in Majora's Mask. Like, it's like cartoony, and like it's got like weird angles and like squared off fingers and stuff. Like, it just, why couldn't it look like a realistic arm? Like, that would fit this game way better.
They could have taken, in fact, this may be what they did, but they could have taken an arm from one of the ghosts that was already in the game.
Yeah.
Already
or
a ghost
even
arm.
One of the main characters. Make it Ren's arm.
Yeah. And just stick it there, and then just have it come out.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Like, what happened? Who modeled the hand separately and was like, this is better?
Yes. Creepy, spooky ghost hand.
I know we're talking about the weird, the grabbing shit mechanic, though. It's super important.
Yeah, I know. It's very important. I really want to point out that I think a lot of these graphical issues, a lot of the weird mechanic stuff, a lot of the Capcominess is all part of like a big bow that's tied around this game that makes me feel like this game is the successor to like the B grade games of the PS2 era. Like, it feels like the same quality of production. And as part of the reason why it feels so weird to us now, because we're like a decade since that's been like a widely economically viable thing to do in the game space.
Sure.
Like, there's just not a lot of, like, kind of middle budget games around anymore.
Like double A games.
Yeah.
If you want to call it that.
I get what you're saying. I feel like it isn't necessarily cause, I mean, that's the pedigree that this game comes from. Obviously, the Fatal Frame games started back on the PlayStation.
Yep.
And really saw a lot of success with Fatal Frame 2, and then this is the 5th one.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who knows that there are 2 other Fatal Frame games. Like, I don't know a single person who's, like,
That's a
played
good point.
Fatal Frames 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Maybe they were a Japan-only thing.
Possible. This is research we probably should have done as podcast hosts. But...
Let's say we'll do it on the break, and then we'll forget.
Good.
Is tradition.
Nailed it. So it is weird, but you can tell how much effort was actually put into some of the locations.
Yes.
So much effort, in fact, that they felt like they needed to revisit them like over and over again.
See, I don't know if you were just making a joke.
Mostly, but it is kind of a problem.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. It just... My big point that I kind of wanted to hold off on till the end, but whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, fuck you, Andy. Give me your point.
The end of the
game,
episode or the end of
yeah,
this
like
discussion?
final thoughts thing, but
okay,
whatever. It doesn't matter at all.
All right.
Is that this game feels rushed, or like it is lacking polish, or they didn't have as much time as they thought.
Right.
They had to meet the Halloween deadline because this came out around Halloween or whatever.
In the U.S., it came out in December in Japan.
So
maybe that's when Halloween
yeah.
is there. I don't know.
But yeah, there's this lack of polish, and it really stands out because it seems like this game had like so much potential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't begrudge it necessarily reusing. Like, if we got on Bayonetta for reusing levels, all you do in Bayonetta is, like, punch guys. In this game, like, you actually have to traverse these areas over and over again. Mm-hmm. And it's weird. Like, it's okay as far as, like, the plot goes. Mm-hmm. But the problem comes when you, as the player, have this, like... You feel more comfortable, and you have this familiarity with the area that the character doesn't have because they've never been there, but you were totally just there minutes ago.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, well, what? It's not... You're like, what stale hell is this? It's the same hell again. Not fresh in any way.
Right. Like, the best parts of the game, like... once I got into the meat of it, were when new areas were introduced.
Yeah,
like
easily.
Like the highway, or not the highway, but like the road for the tunnel that's only used like once.
Yeah, it's used, as far as I remember, it's used one time, and it's still like my favorite part of the game.
Yeah, and like in like the first time, like they go to that little lake with all like the shrine stuff in it, and like when you get to the beach for the first time, it's like, oh, cool, new area.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be that excited that there are new areas.
Well, you're probably correct about that. It does, like, it makes getting to those new areas feel real good.
It does.
So, like, that was a positive experience that I had because of it. The negative experiences were a lot of running from the same starting point from the fucking cable car. By the way, shout-outs to the guy who keeps putting film in the ticket window in the same place.
Yeah.
He's like, oh,
It's
they took
right
the film.
there.
I'll put some new film out.
It's like he's locking
My
up
job's
at the
done.
end of the day, and he like puts the film there.
So big
Gives
ups,
it a pat.
big ups to that dude. But like leaving the cable car station,
Cable car station was cool the first time too.
right? But not cool the subsequent 37.
Right.
It's just, I don't know. I felt like they could have dropped you in levels more often than they did.
Yeah. One thing I did really like was the way they reused the house.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like returning to the house each time was interesting.
That was a big...
I liked becoming familiar with that area.
Yeah, that was the one exception, I think. And especially since the, like, Ren defends the place missions
Yeah.
were all fairly well done.
That was actually like a difference in kind in like how the levels were set up.
Yeah.
For JJ, who did not get to that part.
Oh, damn it, you revealed myself on the cast.
I got you. There's a part where all the women in the house are just like totally kind of like zombified. Not zombified. I don't know how to describe this.
Comatose?
Comatose.
Or
They're all comatose.
Wait,
and they're
stop. They're all Comaghost.
They're all Comaghost.
There we go.
And they're like rambling about like weird, like culty, like ghost things. And Ren is like just monitoring the security cameras, and you have to like watch them and they like rotate on the timer, and you have to like watch for ghosts to come into the house, and then you have to go investigate. And it's actually really well done. And some of like the more like legitimately tense moments, or when like you see a ghost, like just walk out of view, and you're like, oh, what area was that? And what's the next one it's going to show up on?
Yep.
Those were good moments.
Unfortunately, they do not predate Five Nights at Freddy's. That's
Oh,
what I was just looking up. They're close enough in release, though, that it seems unlikely that it was somehow inspired.
Oh, no, it doesn't feel that way.
No, yeah. Because you can actually do shit.
Right, yeah, you can get up and leave the room and
Right.
go find the ghosts.
Kill him.
Yeah, it's like a ghost busting tower defense, but with the same third person.
And sometimes the
mechanics.
ghosts can like fuck with the camera and make it go
static,
staticky.
yeah.
Which is cool.
The second one has a lot of like almost all of the jump scares that exist in this game exist in the second home defense level.
Yeah.
Where you'll the camera cuts to a new thing and there's just like a spooky ghost face.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa! That didn't happen a whole lot in the game.
No.
Yeah.
And this is something that I feel like you guys might be more familiar with, because while I do have sort of an appreciation for horror, I don't generally consume horror media a whole lot in my life. I've seen like very scant few of like this sort of style of horror media. Mm-hmm. So I don't have a firm understanding on what makes psychological horror of this type really work in contrast to traditional horror, because the front of my brain when I was going through this game made me think like this game needs some kind of equivalent of a jump scare. Not literally a jump scare, but just something to either cause and force tension, because I never felt like I was going to die in combat. Or if it couldn't force tension in the mechanics, something to literally just startle me at least. And it never had the first because of mechanical reasons, and it never had the second because it seemed like the game was going for a more subtle, like slow, creeping horror tone. But that tone never really got to me, and I don't quite understand why, because it's a kind of horror that I think I appreciate most out of all horror. But like, was it just the numbers for me? I'm trying to understand my own feelings on this.
This is very J horror and not very Western horror.
It is a Western horror that has, or it is a Japanese horror that has some elements from other, it has a few tropes out of other things, but not really a whole lot. You can tell how much of the Japanese culture they sort of want to contain in this game because of how often they make references to it. Mm-hmm. But the core thing is that it isn't necessarily psychological horror as so much as it is that J horror, which is kind of a different, creepier sort of vibe. The thing that this game is going for isn't like disturbing or like mind-alteringly like, oh, I didn't see that coming. It's just supposed to kind of be like, it's unsettling and it's very, very sad is what they're going for.
There's a lot of like victim of tragic circumstances kind of thing in J horror.
Yeah, that's a really common theme. And as I was talking to you about like not too long ago, like just a couple hours when you first got back, this game also draws from like it has a plot element that's straight out of Martyrs, which is a French film where people are brought to the brink of death in order to experience some kind of enlightenment, and that theme is in here as well. You could also argue that it's in 2017's upcoming Flatliners, but Jerry's still out on if that even is gonna. It's not gonna be good. 1 second movie review for that one.
1 second movie review of a movie that does not... Only movie reviews on our French movie discussion podcast. Chad. Is this game rated like T for teen or like fuck you 18 and up, or like what is this game rated?
It's an M-rated game.
Okay.
Oh, and the reason that it didn't scare you, before we get into that,
Yeah?
the reason it didn't scare you is purely mechanical. Because, like, I feel as though when you take horror and you layer mechanics over top of it, the mechanics start to sort of, like, obfuscate what makes the horror frightening, because now you have agency.
Yes.
And then this game made those mechanics a thing that you operate in order to play a super easy game.
Yeah.
So I feel like you might be scared on Nightmare, on like the hardest difficulty, and otherwise probably wouldn't be because you're too capable of abstracting yourself out from it.
I think what you want from it is if they had a way to make the ghosts stealthier, but it still be fair, so that like ghosts could pop up on you without you noticing till they're like right there.
Yeah. You need to be able, you need to be able to triple the sensitivity basically.
Yeah.
In order for that to
work,
function.
yeah.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're just playing like Fatal Frame Revengeance.
Right.
Yeah.
You do like backflips.
Like with a multi-shot, Ren's just doing a backflip. Yeah. I like this.
I don't feel guilty for feeling like I really engaged with this game on too much of a mechanical level, considering how much like mechanics first abstraction the game throws at you. Mm-hmm. How many freaking like off-screen arrows they are, so that you can make sure you're pointing at the right direction, so you know where the ghosts are at all times, even when the camera's up. And how many points flash on the screen when you're doing a super awesome job.
Yeah. Just a one sentence thing.
Mm-hmm.
Those arrows are just not good.
No.
They're bad arrows. Like,
Bad
they don't
arrows.
even work in the way that they're supposed to.
Terrible.
Anyway, go on.
I wasn't saying anything.
Go on, Andy. What were you saying?
No, I meant the ghost behind you.
Yeah.
No.
Do we want to take a break?
Yeah, I think we do. What do you think, Ghost? So welcome back to the podcast. One thing that we mentioned in the first half and then just kind of never came back to, because we went a little bit long, was that weird hand grabby mechanic. And I feel like it's kind of important to bring up, like more important comparatively to the other less innovative things that this game did. I remember I once, when just talking about horror movies generally, brought up that I thought that my favorite simple innovation in horror film was just sticking a camera on an oscillating fan in Paranormal Activity 3, because of like the added tension of like knowing you have to wait for the screen to pan back over to what you want to see. This had the potential to be that in horror games. The added, like, just grabbing a thing, adding tension to that is such a good idea, but it was executed in, like, the worst imaginable way.
I feel like in order for me to agree with you, you're going to have to explain a version of that mechanic that doesn't suck.
Can I?
Because I can't
Joe?
imagine it.
I can.
I'm going to say go JJ on this.
And a version of the mechanic with actual variability, where you can't predict the success rate in a mechanic in any meaningful way, unlike this game where you can predict success most of the time. Like exactly enough of the time that you don't care and it's just annoying something hits you instead of otherwise.
Right.
And a version of the mechanic where something can go wrong different ways each time. Imagine if like...
But you'd still have the problem of every time you went to pick something up, it would have to be like...
Like a slow...
But imagine if the fuckery was so continuous that when it actually was going through the slow process, hitting the item was actually a relief intention instead of an annoyance that it took that long for you to get the item.
Or worse, you opened a drawer and there was nothing there.
I just feel like that balance would be way too hard to strike. Like, where it happens infrequently enough that you're like, always wondering if it's going to happen, and it happens frequently enough that you aren't annoyed that you have to wait.
Well, I think that this is tied into a separate mechanic that I'll talk about briefly when we finish this discussion, but either way, I do sort of agree with you. I also feel like there are lots of things that you can do in a horror game that are not optimal in most games and have them still work. And I think picking up items slowly is one of them. And I think that doing this correctly, the other added thing that should be on your list of making this good are that it has to present like an actually real threat.
Yes.
As opposed to literally nothing in this.
Yeah. I agree all the things you said would make it better. I still think it would be annoying to have to like pick things up slowly enough all the time.
What needed to happen was there needed to be fewer items. With the same percentage chance of you getting getting grabbed, if there were fewer items, one, it means that you weren't walking around with as many health potions as you ever could possibly need.
Right.
And two, they can just get rid of that thing when picking up lore pamphlets. Because actually in this game strikes an impossible it strikes against impossible odds. I actually like the lore pamphlets. Like, I enjoyed reading those for the most part.
It's horror.
Yeah, like, it added to it because it wasn't really pulling me out of action. It was just, like, a breathing room time. And I appreciated that, thought that was good. But we didn't need to slow grab it from, like, the desk. It's a desk.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there could totally be a good version of this. And it would be a lot of things needed to be changed. Also, the hand should look like good and not like a garbage pile. But I think that's assumed.
Always assume the hand's good, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But if we're done with that, because I thought it could have been so good, totally was so bad. I think it is time. I think the likelihood that you're going to get grabbed is tied with the wetness mechanic, which, as far as I could tell, I couldn't tell.
Yeah, I learned this from watching a review of the game, that, like, your character model has, like, I'm all wet now, like, version of its model where the clothes are wet and clingy.
Notice that.
And that affects, I think, both how many ghosts appear and how aggressive they are.
So you should just be wet all the time.
Or not.
Well,
if you're trying to avoid ghosts.
I meant to make the game like a fun, enjoyable time to play.
Well, the combat would have to be less tedious.
I mean, I like the combat. Either way, the important thing is it does affect the combat, which is weird because I just couldn't tell.
Oh yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where you have to play it. You have to play level twice to go for a better score, in order to even know that there was a difference when you were wet and when you weren't.
I mean, technically that's true, but alternatively, they could have put cues in. They could have put visual cues, like not in terms of just you being wet. That's obvious. I mean, like a visual cue in the difference in behavior of the world. They could have, for lack of a better term, made things spookier.
Right. Yeah.
They could have had the ghosts actually like animate and behave in like a different, more terrifying way when you're in this sort of like threatened state. In order for you to really notice a huge difference with wetness, you would have had to ever be threatened at all, like we talked about in the first half. So, of course, you don't notice the difference between not threatened and not threatened, because why would you?
Right. Then there's like a little blurb that pops up at the beginning, where it's like, if you fill up your wetness gauge, the ghosts are going to be real upset with you. And I was like, I don't know what that means. Like, am I wading into ghost-infested waters? Like, I don't understand where the danger is. And then I proceeded to, like, occasionally dry off and occasionally not, and never really saw much of a difference. So
Right.
It's a really cool theme. I do love the motifs of the whole game, narratively and visually, of, like, being wet is, like, a horrifying experience.
Yeah, I also like that just generally in horror movies, it's something that I brought up when I was talking about the 2013 Evil Dead remake, where they were like, anytime shit is bad, it's wet and gross. And I think it works when that's kind of what you're going for.
Yeah. I always appreciate strong theming. And this game definitely has that in spades.
Yeah. When you're not reading a novelization of the game itself within the game,
right?
It's got you're always like in water or wading through water, or it's raining, or somebody's telling you about water.
Right.
Where we're talking about sort of like niche mechanics, can I have a soapbox for a second to complain about the existence of the ghost tracker button?
Oh, like
the
The trace.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why does this horror game have an entire mechanic centered around preventing you from getting lost?
I think they were just concerned that it would take people forever to get through areas.
It feels a little more appropriate in one of the early areas where it's like a more open forest location, like before you get to the doll shrine.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's fairly linear.
Yeah,
and, like, it's completely unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
You go through the same areas tons of times after their initial introduction anyway, to such an extent that we noted that it started mitigating the horror because we could start memorizing the layout of the mountain. And on top of that, we now have a guidance button.
Yeah, it feels like something that should have been like an upgrade for like if you want to
for
use
the camera.
this,
Yeah,
like
well, because it has like a there's like a whole thing in the plot that's built into it to the point where it's such a plot centric thing, like following somebody's trace.
Yeah.
That I have difficulty judging whether or not the mechanic came before or after.
I don't know if it's
plot.
in the older games or not, but
Right.
yeah, it feels like it makes sense from like a story perspective that they would like be able to follow the trace of this person up the mountain to find them.
And I agree, but they could have
But
still...
mechanically it just doesn't translate.
You could have still had a version of that theme that would work mechanically in a game like this. All you'd have to do is just take out player agency from making the traces appear.
Yeah.
So that there was no longer a trace button, so that you instead had to pay attention when you're walking around and look and see traces that would pop up either randomly or the first time that you're in an area.
Well, I'm personally a little bit glad that it was in there because from what you guys would have seen a few hours ago, I used it mostly as like a handbrake where I would run, and when I would come to a turn, I would hit the button so that my character spun in the direction of where I was supposed to be going, and then I would continue running. That's most of what I used it for, unless I was actually lost, which happened occasionally, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I'm not the best at navigation, but you also have a map.
Yep. You do have a map.
That frequently will show you when you find a key, like what door it's for.
Yeah. It's another weird decision.
Yeah. It's very odd. They were super not confident with the player's ability to complete this game, so they gave them as many possible boons to get through it.
This is such like a lame self-identifies as gamer thing to say, but this game's normal mode felt like it was easy mode. Like,
right.
It felt like it had the same kind of additional mechanics layered on top of each other to make sure absolutely that you got to the end of the narrative experience if you wanted to. Which makes me think, like, what is easy on this game even?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine it being easier.
I mean, it could very well just be for people who don't want to, like, they wanted to hear a ghost story, basically.
they wanted ghost photography, ghost 'em on Snap.
Yeah, which is what it would be, theoretically. You would have some agency, but for the most part, you're following a straight line and occasionally photographing ghosts. Like, I could totally point out people who would think that was an enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
So I think that's what easy mode is for, but they probably should have called it like Safari mode or something.
Baby mode.
Yeah.
Baby mode. Right?
Pretty strong decision of their part to just put you in like the fucking Mako 1 or whatever the name of that stupid
I think it's called the 01.
It was 01.
And
That
what,
was
the car in Pokemon?
Yeah.
yeah, a little like bubble.
It does have a
floater.
name. I'm actually ashamed I don't know that.
You
It seems like
should be, Jesus.
trivia that I would know.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, it had something to do with zero gravity.
Mm-hmm. I swear to God,
It might be the
01.
01. That sounds familiar enough.
It's kind of a bad name, but what are you gonna do?
It's probably where we aren't sure that it's the right name because it's so unbelievably generic that there's like no way we could ever confirm.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just sounds like something that we would make up.
So, how much of this game's plot do you guys did you guys like actually engage with?
I was interested in the plot, in the atmosphere, but I really didn't like the delivery. Like that, so much of it was in text.
Yeah.
I
From the very beginning.
yeah,
too.
it's kind of like a Metroid Prime thing for me, where like there's just so much optional text that like I feel like I maybe read like a third of the things that I picked up. Like it was just so much that I stopped caring after a while.
Yep.
I read everything that I picked up, but it was a pretty significant chunk of it, and there were entries that just didn't feel like they were necessary. I felt like they were really rehashing the same kind of information. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't sure if they felt like they needed to give a reason for every character to know stuff, because every one of you, like every single character picks up a book at some point that says like Mount Hikami was like a big suicide spot. It's like we've established this a dozen times.
Right.
Like we do not need to go any further.
Yeah, I wish that the game would have delivered its narrative in other ways.
In cutscenes.
Yeah, like had a
the
couple more
cutscenes were really
cutscenes.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like even just had like more dialogue exchanges between characters. Or there could have been like a number of ways they could have like communicated stuff in a different way than just having you read it.
Right.
Just because it's in text doesn't mean that it's subtle. And this game seems to think that like taking the quiet moment to like pour over these old pages is a subtle thing when it's not, when it's given to you that many times in a row and with the same themes over and over again.
Yeah, and the way that it treats the text documents, like people make fun of BioShock for having like people just like leaving fucking like gramophones laying around with audio logs on them. This is a way worse offender than that. Like, it feels like the people wrote diaries. Like every character ever wrote a diary and then
was
got
carrying
lost
it around with
and
them.
was like leaving pages behind like breadcrumbs. Like they're like, if I need to find my way back, I'll just go from entry 4 to 1.
I even feel like audio logs would have been better for this game. Like, if you could have, like, just picked it up and, like, let it play while you, like, keep walking around.
Yeah, I agree completely.
If that's just what those, like, what are they called? Trace touches or whatever? Like, when you kill a ghost and you touch it as it's dying?
Fatal glance.
The glances. They could have just made the glances trigger audio logs from the people who are dying.
But occasionally, you get a fucking dope cutscene.
You never got to see this because you were playing on my file. But, like, the first time you get any, like, new type of ghost with that, it plays a cutscene that gives you, like, insight into, like, how that person died.
I went back and rewatched them all in the gallery before.
Yeah. So that's cool.
It is cool.
And they're all really well, like, they're done in this, like, grainy VHS style. Mm-hmm. And it, like, there's a variation between each of them where it's either going to be, like, total grindhouse where, like, somebody's standing in the woods and, like, fucking, like, jams a railroad spike through their face, or it's, like, a really subtle, subdued, like, somebody just giving up on life and, like, falling off of a cliff or something.
Yeah.
And they do it so well that, like, each one of those I thought was really good, and most of the cinematics in this game I thought were really good as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Fatal Glances feel like a series of, like, good, like, short horror vignettes.
Yep.
I think we mentioned a couple of times how the animation in this game sometimes feels stiff. I think it is stiff generally, and I agree. But I think in the context of these horror scenes, that's actually might have been, like, them making the best of their budget, so to speak, historically speaking, because the stiffness of the animations makes the cutscenes of this game creepier in a way that I like. The thing that jumped out to me really quick was one of the earliest tutorials in which you're playing as the girl running around with the girl who's teaching you how to be like a psychic investigator or whatever.
Yeah.
Yuri.
Yeah, and like ghosts attack you for the first time and you're like sitting down in the water, and she with this like blank video game ass expression just like walks over and gives you like a warm hug right after the attack without saying a single word. And that like actually got to me. Like that was a freaky moment, in part because of how little emotion the characters were conveying while doing an emotional thing.
Right.
And that got kept up in a lot of the ghost interactions in a way that I actually liked. It was a cool upside to band animation.
Yeah, because jerky animation is the way that you sell ghosts in like a way that is good.
Mm-hmm.
Like a ghost just like walking around and shit, not super frightening, but like a ghost doing like a weird motion, like teleporting, pretty scary.
Yeah.
So I think but yes, the animation on your primary characters really could have used a bit of an upgrade.
Yeah.
Do we have final thoughts or non-final thoughts?
What about fatal thoughts?
Do we have fatal thoughts? I'm cutting the rest of that. We're using that take. Do we have fatal thoughts?
I am a little bit disappointed in this game. I thought the game thematically was close to exactly what I wanted it to be, but was mechanically a little bit too Capcom and a little bit too PS2 era, like B-grade video game.
I think it's important to stress that it was not Capcom that made this game.
I know what you mean.
But yeah, it does take Capcom elements a lot.
I love that comparison so much. I wanted this game to be more like modern indie games, where it's more like experimental and completely all in with its themes, especially since it was willing to use the Wii U as a camera game in the first place, and the weirdness of only launching it on an online platform. I think I'm going to have mixed feelings about this game for a very long time, and is the kind of game that I wish in like 5 to 6 years some like real crazy modder is going to make like an updated version for the Wii U, in the same way that people did for like Metroid 2 for the Game Boy. Like, I want a fan remake of this game for the Wii U.
AFFMOBWR.
Yes.
Yeah, that.
My fatal thoughts are that
Have Halloween, motherfuckers.
this game's got a lot of issues. Like I said earlier, it is lacking a lot of polish in like several different areas. But despite all of that, I did enjoy this game. It might just be like my general liking of survival horror and things horror in general. But there is a good game in there, and it's just kind of a shame that it didn't come together better than it did. But I played it all the way through, and I did enjoy my time with it. And I feel like the fact that it's on the Wii U makes me like it more. Like, I have this like feeling about a couple of Wii U games. Like one of them is like Xenoblade X. Like it's just never not going to be novel to me that it's an open world game on the Wii U. Like it just like makes it seem cooler to me. And like this like weird like
an underdog way.
Yeah, like this weird third person like AAA horror game that's like a Wii U exclusive. Like it just makes it more interesting to me.
Yeah, and that's like that's sort of how I'm going to parlay into what I thought about this. Is that like I feel super mixed on this, and I feel like that's the only way to feel about this game. I think there are going to be very few people who like absolutely love this game, and probably more people who really hate it, but in either direction, it's a game that could have been really good, but was marred by a whole lot of kind of weird baggage that we don't see a whole lot of these days. And I think that the reason I enjoyed it so much was mostly just because it was one of the first, like, true to its roots survival horror games that I've played in a long-ass time. As much as I, have been outspoken in saying that I prefer these, like, haunted house-style games that have been coming out recently that focus on literally just scaring the shit out of you and not so much on the actual mechanics. I sometimes miss this kind of shit, and barring RE7 at the very beginning of this year, this is like the only traditional survival horror that I've played. So that, and combined with the fact that it was like a cool gamepad gimmick, made me really enjoy it. But I can totally understand absolutely hating this piece of shit.
Fuck you. Good night.
Thank you for listening to this very spooky episode of No Clip.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we're going to be talking about Epistory Typing Chronicles. Which, if that sounds like complete inane bullshit to you, don't worry, it's quite good. I think I destroyed JJ.
I'm sorry, we never said it aloud until now, so it sounds much worse now that we're saying it aloud.
Until then, if you want to get a hold of us, you can do so on noclippodcast.com. All of our contact information is there, as well as links to our Twitter, YouTube, etc., etc. Thank you for listening. And hot fuck, it's Halloween.
Yes.
Forgot to mention the weird ninja bonus missions.
That's true. I didn't get to those.
Yeah.
Those seem weird and another Capcom-esque thing that shouldn't have existed.
It's like super weird. You play as like what you would expect, like anime sexy ninja girl.
I didn't even guess it was going to be a female.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be like a straight man.
No. Imagine this game's version like a young Japanese sexy ninja girl.
I assume wearing like a skirt and not like all
she's
black.
actually like wearing a ninja-y outfit at first. She shows up to that building where you do the tutorial, where the part that you mentioned where the mentor is taking you through the house or the hotel.
Yeah.
You show up there and like you've been sent to like find one of these missing people. As a ninja, I don't know why. And you go in there, and you have this thing called the Thread, which is like your version of the Trace. It's like a weird purple thing where she like holds her arm up, and it shoots out, and it shows her what direction to go.
Okay.
But it alerts ghosts to your presence. So she gets attacked. You use it. She gets attacked by ghosts, and she can't do anything. And then that's like the end of her first chapter. It's really short. And then she goes and she gets these weird tattoos that allow her to, like, sense ghosts' presence, like, to see ghosts. But it, like, nearly kills her to, like, get the tattoos or whatever, some weird shit.
That is like a ninja thing.
She also gets, like, a flashlight that lets her stun the ghosts.
Right.
That's not a ninja thing at all.
No.
One, yeah, not so much.
I think that kind of broke the theme with
but once she has the tattoos, like, she had just like black ninja pants, whatever, and she had like a weird little coat thing with a hood that had no sleeves, like a cute Japanese ninja girl hoodie thing.
Right.
And then after she gets the tattoos, that's off of her character model, and she's just like wearing a corset. And so you can see the tattoos on her back.
Oh yeah, of course.
And then she has like a headband with a feather in it for some reason. Because I guess she saw like a shaman to get the tattoos or whatever.
Okay, and so he gave her
a turkey feather.
A turkey feather.
Yeah, headband. Okay.
Yeah, it's like super weird. It's just like 2 missions where you use those mechanics.
You're
and
like a Navajo ninja.
Yeah, it's like, why did they spend the time and money on this? Like,
what if that they were planning a spin-off game?
They might
for that character,
or like it was a concept that didn't get used in the main game, and they were like tacking it on the end,
right?
Because it doesn't tie into the plot of the main game at all.
No, it doesn't seem like it would.
Yeah, like you can play it and it doesn't like spoil anything. You know, it just
seems really just like a hanging thread.
Yeah, it is. Pull it and the whole thing won't rail.
If you want to destroy the podcast, whoa, make that joke and I'll walk away. As I walk away, watch me unravel I'll turn off the recording. Gotta do it now. Gotta do it now. Alright, I'm doing it now.